Okay, cool. I'm finally on. If anybody is still awake, this is now Level 3 Focus with Ultra David. It's actually pretty cool for me that James took as long as he did on First Attack today because I came in to his house having no idea what I was going to do the show on. So after thinking about it a little bit, I really want to talk about mix-ups. I'd also like to talk about dealing with idiots in mix-ups. If we have time for that, there's a chance that we might not. If not, that's what my next week's show is going to be about. So yeah, planning in advance, kind of. That's going to be a different thing for me, for sure. So mix-ups are one of the most important things in fighting games. I would broadly say that there are four main parts of a fighting game. This is something that I introduced in the very first Level 3 Focus that I ever did, about a year and some change ago, in which I had kind of a rubric to discuss fighting games, and I thought that there were four main things that went into it. It was strategy and tactics and mix-ups and execution, which I'm now going to redefine as physical control, just in general. Strategy is your overall game plan. It's, which situations you want to force your opponent into, which situations to avoid yourself, your overall sort of overarching thing. If I'm Dalsum, I'm going to be trying to play a more defensive strategy, and there are certain ways that you do that. If I'm Zangief, I want to play more offense, or in some matchups maybe also defense. Just depends. That's your strategy. The next step is the tactics part of the situation, part of the equation. These are tools and options that you use in furtherance of whatever your strategy is. So again, if I'm Dalsum, and my strategy is this defensive keep-away system, I use tools like Far Stand Fierce, and Fireball, and back roundhouse for anti-airs. Or if I'm playing Marvel, and I'm playing Morrigan, my strategy is to call Doom and do some soul fists. Right? There are these different tools that you use. That's what tactics are. And then I think there are mix-ups. And a mix-up is just an individual guess that you force onto your opponent. That's all. It's a very simple idea. The last thing is physical control, by which I mean execution, that is controlling your character in whatever way you want to. But I think I'd also like to add in the ability to react to situations, that is reaction time, which I think probably goes in there too. So I think that those are the four main things, and I talk usually about strategy and tactics because that's what interests me. That's what I'm interested in fighting games for, is the strategy side and the furtherance of that strategy. And mix-ups to me have always kind of been a part of the game, certainly a part of the game that the characters that I like to use have to exploit, but just a part of the game that I've kind of come to view as like the payoff for a situation. It's not what I play for, it's a part of the game engine that I use like everybody else because I have to. But what I really care about is the spacing, the strategy, the innovation in tactics, that kind of stuff. That's what I like. So I tend to ignore mix-ups, and I've gotten a lot of emails and messages from people who want me to talk more about the mix-up side of things, which is perfectly understandable. I've said in the past that I think that it's hard to characterize mix-ups, and it's hard to teach mix-ups. And to some degree, I think that that's true still, although I'll get to that at the end. But you can teach them to some degree. You can talk about them to some degree. Mix-ups, like I said, are just an individual guess that you force onto your opponent. And let's say that you're just in some situation where there is a mix-up. The strategies have been melted down. Maybe I've knocked you down in the corner, and now you know that there's going to be a mix-up incoming. Some situation like that. The guess that comes in is one that I force on you, but that, if it's going to be a real mix-up, is one that requires some kind of information on both players' sides. And I think what you start at is this kind of default situation. That's what I would like to call it. And that default is different in every game. In some games, like in Street Fighter 4, that default might be down back. James was just talking about this in his First Attack episode earlier today. How important down back is in a game like Street Fighter 4. Now, of course, you do have to high block sometimes. Sometimes you have to escape if there's a command grab coming. But that's the situation that you wake up into most of the time. In other games, it's very different. In Marvel vs. Capcom 3, it's not so much down back as it is up back, or just up, or something like that. It's to escape rather than to stay on the ground. Other games are different yet again. There are games like in, let's see, what requires you to be mostly standing. I don't know that there's really a game like that, but the point is that every game has its own default, and you have to understand what that default is as the person doing the mix-up to create a mix-up out of it. So say that you are, you know what, can you go over to the game, please? Okay, cool. So let's go over to this dude, just because I know how to use him a little bit, and I'm going to pick up Ken because he was there before, and I guess I'll just stick with that. In this game, people like to crouch block. That's just kind of the default. So the question is, what do you mix up with? What's a mix-up at that point? At that point, a mix-up... Oh, let me turn that off. A mix-up is just something that is a variation... That is an exploitation of the opponent's expectation of the default. So if I knock somebody down and they think that they're supposed to wake up crouching, there are some ways to deal with that. Their expectation is that they should wake up crouching, and so I have to have a variation on that, some way to exploit it. So there are lots of different things you can do, of course. One is a high attack, like a jump. One is a throw. Or if you're somebody like Hakan, it's a... good job, hands. It's a command grab. That's kind of like the level 1 sort of thing. It's just the basic, not default situation. You're exploiting your opponent's expectation that it is going to be a default. It's something else entirely, and so he gets hit or grabbed. The question then is, what do you do after that to keep maintaining a mix-up? I would say that there are then these various levels that you have to go through. And this is what some people like to call Yomi. I think that that word is stupid. But it kind of gets the point across, that it's about these levels and wheels of options. It's starting out at A and going to B, and then to C, and then to D, and all the way back to the start. And I think that that's actually a pretty fair way to look at it. You can do a level 2 sort of mix-up. I don't know if I want to call it that, but the next level of mix-up is something that is a variation on the expectation that I've created from on the part of the opponent. So after I knock him down, let's say that I go with grab. I've now created a new expectation on the part of the opponent as to what's going to be coming in. Maybe now the opponent expects a grab, or maybe the opponent specifically expects a command grab. If you're that opponent getting up now, you have to respond to that situation that you've been put into, to that bad situation that you've been forced into. And keeping in mind that it seems like your opponent doesn't want to go for the default, and now you have to kind of think about what your responses might be to the opponent not going for the default. That kind of brings you around to the beginning again. So let's say that I do this the first time, right, a command grab. Maybe the opponent wants to jump away immediately afterward because they've grown to expect that there's going to be a command grab incoming. Well, Hakan has a bunch of ways to deal with that. If the opponent's going to jump, I can do some jabs to keep him on the ground and combo into slide, that kind of thing. I can instead do an air grab. I can instead do a light kick DDT. I have all these options. I can do even Ultra 2, for example. All these options to deal with what that expectation is. Now let's say that the opponent thinks, or now let's say that the opponent has the expectation that they cannot, or that they should be expecting this jump, that they should be expecting to deal with a command grab by not being there for the command grab. Okay, I've taken advantage of that by, say, doing air throw. Now the opponent, I think, has seen my mix-ups. My wheel of mix-ups are basically not there anymore. He's seen what I'm going to do if he jumps. He's seen what I do if he stays on the ground. And so now it just kind of goes back to the default. I'm back at the start of this wheel. So right now, the opponent might, having just seen that I'm ready to deal with his jump, stay on the ground, and I go back to this. That's kind of what mix-ups are in a really oddly worded nutshell. That is, it's about starting out at whatever the default is in the game that you're in, and going to some variation on whatever that expectation of default is. And then after that, it's going to another variation on that non-default expectation. It's about exploiting the opponent's mindset throughout these different variations. Exploiting an expectation that something will be default or not default, or at yet another level of not default, at which point the default expectation becomes a better option for you. So let's say that I'm playing against Ken, and I've gone through these little options, right? Command grab. Okay, he saw command grab. Imagine that he's jumping now. I do an air grab. And now he's seen both of those things. At this point, maybe he wants to wake up with a dragon punch. He just says, get off me. I'm sick of dealing with this. Here's my dragon punch. I'm going to get up and just let go of the situation. This is where default becomes an important part of my own mix-up. So remember what the default is. It's him waking up on the ground. And it's me just kind of staying on the ground, not doing anything, right? This is the default situation in Street Fighter 4, of being on the ground, both characters in kind of this sort of position. That doesn't work as a mix-up at the very start, but it does work as a mix-up at the very end. Because if the opponent thinks that he wants to wake up with a dragon punch, now I can, as a mix-up, not do anything at all. That is to say, to use the default position. That's kind of what I think of mix-ups being, is this little jaunt around a circle. Not super fascinating, I would say, but that I think is what it is. I'd really like to show a few different games and how mix-ups go in those different games, because, like I said, the default is different in different games. So what I'm going to do is show this. I guess I have been showing Street Fighter 4, and kind of what the default situation is and what some variations on it are. But it's very different in Marvel 3, like I said. And it's different, too, in a game like Super Turbo. So I would like to, I guess, take a break while we put in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And I'll be back with just a little bit of an example of what mix-ups are in that kind of a game, in that very different setting. Oh, hey, what's up? I'm back. Welcome back to Level 3 Focus. Today we're talking about mix-ups, mostly because it's something that I don't normally talk about. It's kind of an incidental point to a lot of the things that I like to highlight in fighting games. I know that I'm kind of different from a lot of people in that respect. A lot of people do like to focus on mix-ups as being a major part of the game, and certainly they are major parts of the game. But I don't think that they're the most interesting thing for the most part. Well, that said, since I never talked about it, I would like to get this little explanation of things going on. So, in the Street Fighter 4 example that we had before, I introduced the idea that mix-ups are basically variations on expectations, and they kind of go in a circle. That is, you start out in a default situation, which is dependent on the game that you're playing and the matchup that you're playing. And then from that default, you take advantage of the opponent's expectation of the default situation by doing some variation on it. After that, you've created a new expectation on the part of the opponent, and so you take advantage of that with some different level of whatever mix-up. And then at some point of levels of mix-ups, things no longer really are mix-ups, except for the original default position is now a mix-up. So I illustrated that with Hakan by doing command grab, then an expectation that the opponent thinks there's a command grab and would jump. I do an air grab, then an expectation that the opponent thinks that there's an air grab and just is tired of the situation and wants to dragon punch out of it. I just go back to what my default position was in the first place, which was just hanging out and not even pressing at all. In which case the dragon punch whiffs and I get to punish. So that's a basic kind of wheel of options there. In Marvel, it's very different, because in Marvel, the fundamental position, the default position, is not this. It's not down back. It's more like this. You know, it's movement. It's a lot of stuff like that. So when I play Marvel, this is my team, by the way, although not necessarily in this order always. When I play Marvel, say that I have Thor on point, and I'm trying to mix the opponent up. I'll tell you what doesn't work that well. Let's go to dummy and Let's go to auto guard. So Thor, if you don't know much about him, has, you know, a reasonable wow, alright, this might not be a good hands episode, let's see. Yeah, so he has a reasonable tri-jump. And he can do, well, it's totally not, awesome. He can do super jump into air dash down toward into L, which is a nice little way of approaching. But it's not going to hit almost anybody at the start, because the default position in this game is, here, actually, can you pick up the controller? Are you in here?
That's a PlayStation 3 controller.
Oh, no?
Look over there.
Oh, well, don't worry. I'll just...
No, there's one right there.
Oh, I see. All right. I'll just put it on replay if not.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to get James in here just to kind of show what often happens if I come in for this approach. It's a very obvious approach because, like I said, in Marvel 3, down back is not the default position. It's getting away. It's jumping backwards. So there you go, sir. So say I'm trying to come in with this, right? The default is not you crouching in reality, right? It's you doing this or whatever kind of movement, something like that. So my basic that is just not really going to do that well. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. When you and I play, when I try to do that, it just doesn't work out very often.
Chicken block a lot.
Right, you chicken block all the time. Right. So instead, let's see. Come on, him. Let's see.
Wow.
All right, this sucks. Very inopportune time. Aha! Oh, I almost had it. What I'm trying to do is try dash into crouching L, which is just something that you see oftentimes. Say that I have, Hagar spinning here, and you have the choice as the James to stand block, which is kind of more the default because you're trying to get away, or to crouch, or to, well, you get hit by this because your expectation is that, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of level 1 in this situation. Level 2 is something else entirely. So now I've abused his expectation of the default by going low, right? So what's your response to that? Say that you see me coming in like that. It's to go low, right?
It's to stay low, yeah.
All right, well, let's see. Aha! So that's a basic option with Thor. If I have Hagar spinning here, or if I have a projectile like I do sometimes, although not with Hulk, then that's another option. That's the next level of the situation. It will beat both a high block and a low block, or even something else entirely like that, right? Which comes up a lot.
Which is the anti-chicken block,
yeah, right? Right, exactly. Although I was really trying to get command grab. Oh well. But that's so at this point now we're kind of at a third level of Yomi, if you want to call it that. We're at a point in the mix-ups where we're starting to get back down to where the default is. Like I said, the default is you looking to just kind of stand block. And let's see. I'm not really going to be able to open you up with a high attack, right? For the most part, unless I've gone, low, or I've gone grab, or I've gone grab. At that point, that's the only point when the instant jump into the high attack starts to become an actual option. It's not something that's available to you as a mix-up at the start. It's only an option as a mix-up after we've gone around the circle. So that's a little bit different than in Street Fighter 4. Like I said, this expectation of the default varies considerably game to game. It varies, in how people look to block. It varies in how people look to escape. All sorts of stuff like that, and you have to know that kind of situation to be able to deal with it. Mix-ups are about recognizing your opponent's expectations and then taking advantage of them in some way. That's basically what they are. At each level that I've been talking about, all I'm doing is taking advantage of my opponent's expectations by varying or by doing something other than what my opponent expects or has seen from me. Obviously, the real mix-ups begin when the opponent knows all of the stuff that I have. So say I just played the first attempt with James, and I've done all of the things that I just talked about. He's seen all my little mix-ups, right? And Thor has more than just basic high-low throw. There's a lot of other little fanciness that you can get going. But say that he knows all my mix-ups. Now is when the mix-up game really begins. That's when it gets to be a little bit of a different story. What I've been talking about is setting the ground rules for what the mix-up game is. And they still apply. Even once he knows all of what my options are, they still kind of apply, because keep in mind that every time you play somebody, even if you've played them before, it is still a new time. And you recognize that you know what their opponents, or what their mix-up options are. They know what your options are too. But you're still going to have to establish things. We say that all the time. In Street Fighter 4, James brought this up a little bit in his previous episode. Cammy is going to need to throw somebody for them to be scared. Because if Cammy's not throwing anybody, then there's really no reason to be that worried. You can just block all of her stuff. She doesn't have any overhead attacks. You can just kind of hang out and crouch block and wait for things, right? Even if I know that my opponent has the ability to throw me, I'm not worried unless my opponent throws me in that game. That's how it works. I'm going to have that knowledge be a little bit tempered by the fact that I know that he can do that stuff, but if he hasn't shown to me that he thinks that that's a good option, then I don't need to worry about it that much, because what matters is that he is varying. He's exploiting my expectations as he sees my expectations. And so there's no reason for me to change my expectations if he hasn't made me change my expectations. That's basically how I look at this whole situation. Beyond that, I think it starts to become difficult to give real advice, because it basically comes down to, do you have experience in situations, and can you recognize situations, and do you know the player, and do you know all the little things that go into it? Can you recognize the player's preferences? Can you recognize what a player considers default? All that stuff. That's really things that you have to get through experience. It's not really something that you can just be taught. That's why I like to focus on strategy and tactics a lot more, because that is something that is much more easily teachable, something that's much more interesting to me in general. But certainly that's something that is more teachable. Mix-ups are kind of more, once you understand the options, mix-ups are a little bit more intuitive, a little bit harder to explain. And so when you hear me commentating or James commentating, we'll often just say, nice mix-up. Oh, he thought that the opponent expected this, and he went with that, and maybe he's right. That's kind of all it boils down to. I don't think that it's super complicated. While I'm on this subject, somebody asked me to talk about what I mean by okie doke, something I say a lot while commentating. An okie doke is a stupid mix-up that really shouldn't work. It really is just not a great option. So something that I apply that often to is in Street Fighter 4, Boxer's EX overhead, or just overhead dash punch. It's pretty stupid. Most people should be able to react to it. It's really not that fast. It really only works if people are just totally asleep, or if, as the Boxer player, man, you have really put a number on them in terms of exploiting their expectations of the situation. But again, if the opponent has good reaction times, they should be able to react to it. That's an okie doke. And, it's just kind of a funny word, so that's why I say it too. It doesn't really have like an exact definition. I would also like to talk about idiots. And I guess I'll take a little bit of a break before getting into it for the most part, but idiots are really frustrating to me. They always have been.
I'm sorry.
Not you. But, man, when I played in tournaments, they were so tough for me. I had such a hard time dealing with that. There was this period of time when I did really well consistently in Street Fighter 4 and in ST, where I got top 3 every time I made it past the 3rd or 4th round of a tournament. The reason was I started to get into players who weren't idiots, and I knew how to exploit that. I was good at that, but I sucked at dealing with idiots, and so oftentimes, if I didn't get top 3, I went 1 and 2, or I went 2 and 2, and I was out. And it took me a long time to kind of understand how to play against idiots, and really it took me, I guess, past my actual playing career to deal with that. So I'll talk about that a little bit after the break. Alright, hey, welcome back to Level 3 Focus. We've been talking about mix-ups, but now I want to kind of switch things and head over to Idiot Land. Man, idiots are so frustrating to play against, and I know everybody has dealt with that. I know everybody has also been an idiot. I've certainly been. But, it's... At some point, you kind of quit being an idiot, and you just have to kind of transition into the part where you play against idiots. So, let me start this by saying that you can be good in Street Fighter in a bunch of different ways. That's one of the best things about fighting games, is that there are all these different ways to be really, really good. The four things that I mentioned at the start, right? Strategy, tactics, mix-ups, and physical control. There are some people who are awesome at all of those things. And I'm thinking of guys who have had the most dominant runs of whatever game they've been involved in, like Justin Wong or Daigo Umehara or, Heyday Alex Valle and Mike Watson, or, there are lots of guys. It seems like Infiltration is that way now. They are just good at everything. That's the best. But for everybody who's not like that, there are different ways to be good. So one guy I'm thinking of is somebody who is really smart, great at strategy, great at tactics, very innovative in tactics, pretty good in mix-ups, and not very good at all in execution and physical control, and that's Viscant. That is Viscant. He won Marvel vs. Capcom 3 EVO 2011, not because he had better execution than anybody. That is not the case. Not because he had better reactions than people, and not even because he had the best mix-ups, but because he just played a game that was exactly to his strengths. He identified characters and matchups that were perfect for him because he's smart enough to be able to do that. This is not to say anything bad about him. I think that's the kind of play that I respect the most. If I were to pick a player who I would respect the most, it's that kind of guy. That's awesome to me. Then there are people who are good at everything, like Combo Fiend. He's good at everything. He is solid at all of those things, and that's why he's really good. And then there are guys who are not the best at strategy. They don't have the most innovative tactics, but they are awesome in mix-ups. They have great predictive powers, and when they do guess right, they take advantage of it with the best physical control that you can ask for. And I'm thinking of Marn when I think of somebody like that. And I think Marn would even admit that too. Actually, he's just told me straight up that he's like that in the past. So there's no bones about that one. When he was good in fighting games, even now, if you watch him play, it's because he can do things really well, he can react really well, and he has a great idea of mix-ups. He's not in there creating new stuff. He's not, picking the sweet spots on the screen all the time. He's not doing the safest things. He's kind of a nut, but he succeeds, right? I mean, even now when he doesn't play fighting games that much, he still does well in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 whenever he plays at the Runback here in SoCal. Before that, I mean, he had a really strong Dudley. Before that, he had a really strong Viper. I mean, he really did. And it's because of the fact that he was great at those two things. But not to say he was horrible at strategy and tactics, but his strengths were mix-ups and physical control. So that's great that you can be good in all those different ways. But it's also really annoying. It's also really annoying that you can be pretty good, not great, but you can be okay by just having mix-ups and physical control, and very little in the strategy and tactics department. That's annoying, and it's something that everybody has to learn how to deal with. So I would define an idiot as somebody who either ignores or is weak at the strategy and tactics part of things, but is good at mix-ups and the physical control side of things. And they keep the mix-ups, I would say, to a very simple level. So where I was talking about before there being, we start at the default level and move to level 1 and 2 and 3 and all the way back down to default. And there's kind of this intricate web of the whole mix-up system. An idiot tends to not really see that far. And even if you're trying to get there by showing them what your potential options are, still kind of doesn't get that far. I would say that idiots oftentimes misunderstand the game's default position anyway. So something you'll see people who aren't good at a game do is crouch block in Marvel 3 as a default. That's a stupid idea. I see players on Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter Cross Tekken who will just wake up with jump, with neutral jump. I see that all the time, even though it's a horrible idea. In Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, people want to jump in parry all the time, or they want to wake up parry all the time, and that's just a really stupid idea. But they have this idea of what the default situation is that just isn't right. It's their idea, though. And I find that the people I'm talking about will like to enforce that idea of what the default is. That is, they won't easily give up that conception. And you can take advantage of that if you're playing against an idiot. You can take advantage of it because as long as you recognize what their idea of the default is and how far they can go in this wheel of mix-ups in this Yomi game, then there's really not that much to worry about. So, like I said, when I was playing in tournaments, I had a lot of trouble playing against people like this. And I talked with Ed Ma about it, and I'll never forget that he said that he has stuff that he uses against smart players, and he has entirely different stuff that he uses against dumb players. He had different strategies, he had different tactics, he would use different mix-ups, all that stuff he would design explicitly for people who he didn't think knew anything. Yeah, scrub is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm just using the word idiot just to be more of a douche, but scrub is the same kind of thing. Somebody who doesn't think and refuses to think, and is just playing the game in a way that is not the right way to play the game. They fail to see what the right way to play the game is. So I think that's pretty close. So Ed, in telling me that, kind of, I don't know why it took me so long to figure it out, but I started thinking more about it, and he was right. So playing against idiots is basically, I would say, about three things in order of my own preference. This is my idea. So if I can get away with it, I want to just play with strategy and tactics. I don't even want to get involved in the mix-up game if I can help it. I want to pick a sweet spot on screen. I want to stand there and press as few buttons as possible and just get it over with. So if I'm... This is really easy with Dalsum in Street Fighter 4. If I'm at a certain spot, I can throw a fireball and know that I suffer no repercussions. Let's say that there's a matchup like that. And I'll just react to your jump. I mean, that's all. I put myself in this spot where there's no mix-up from my perspective. All I'm doing is doing something that I know is superior in strategy and tactics. So as long as I can do that, I'll do that. If I can't do that, then the next best thing to do is try to quickly recognize what somebody considers to be the default position in the fighting game you're playing. So if somebody's default position is to crouch block in Street Fighter 4, maybe they're not an idiot. But if their default position is wake up jump, if their default position is wake up fireball, if their default position is even wake up dragon punch, then you recognize that, and all you got to do is vary the mix-ups on that default. You have to exploit that by doing something that is non-default, and it's pretty easy to do that. So whereas the say that they think the default is wake up dragon punch, all you have to do is just hang out and go to what is otherwise the default all the way back at the start of the circle. But since they can't see all these things up here, all they're seeing is these things down here. All you have to do is just hang out in this region where the mix-ups are only, is he going to dragon punch or not? That's really easy to beat, because you just don't have to you don't have to put yourself in a position where you're going to do anything more than that. When you do get involved in the mix-ups, just try to minimize them. Don't go for things that are crazy. So maybe I wouldn't, to go back to the Hakan versus Ken example that we talked about at the start, where I went for command grab, and then I went for air grab, and then I went for just hang out and block. Maybe I don't even get involved in the air grab games, right? Maybe I just do hang out and then do DDT on wake up. So what I mean by minimize mix-ups is not necessarily to minimize your mix-up options, but to minimize minimize the opponent's responses. Minimize the idiot's responses. So if I'm Hakan on somebody's wake up, who I think is a scrub, I'll just do meaty DDTs all day. And those are pretty easily beaten by wake up crouching whatever normals. And also by Dragon Punches, although he has setups that beat Dragon Punches too. But by most Dragon Punches, they'll win. But the reason I'll go to that is because it just becomes this very simple game. Is he going to Dragon Punch or not? If he does Dragon Punch, I get this giant reward. I get 200 damage, I get free oil, and I get another meaty setup. If he does a Dragon Punch, I'll take 80 damage and not be too worried about the situation. So that's kind of what I mean by that. But I saw somebody in the chat say, minimize mix-ups, Ultra David, that grappler player. That seems weird, right? Something like that. That's exactly why I had trouble dealing with idiots. Believe me, that is exactly why. Because I thought that my game plan was to go for grabs. That was my goal in playing at the time. And that meant that I got myself into these bad situations. It meant that I wasn't playing the strategy game. I wasn't playing the sweet spot game. I was purposely getting involved in mix-ups against people who I thought understood this whole wheel of options, but in fact didn't. And they kept it minimized to a set of mix-ups that I just found infuriating. That they wouldn't get any farther than that they wouldn't learn. Surely this time they'll learn after I've done, meaty grab 2 times and then they've jumped or they've done a Dragon Punch. This next time, they'll get it. They'll know. And they didn't, and I lost. That's exactly why I grew to finally learn how to deal with this situation, because I had put myself in that spot so many stupid times. So I think that's pretty much how you play against idiots. It's prefer to keep your spacing, prefer to keep your sweet spots, prefer to do whatever your large strategy is, prefer to not get involved in the mix-up game until you understand what you think the opponent's default expectations are, and you've identified ways to vary that expectation, to exploit that expectation with some variation. And then even once you do, to keep it simple in a way that covers most of the opponent's options. Man, I wish that I had thought about that back in the day. It would have been so... I don't know, I mean, seriously. The critique that somebody brought up was totally spot on. It seems weird for a grappler player to say that. But now, looking at people who are good at grapplers nowadays, think about somebody like Snake Eyes. He does not feel the need to go in recklessly for command grabs. He's just not about that. In fact, in some matchups, he will purposely play defense as Zangief. I mean, Flash Metroid got top 8 at EVO by basically playing defensive Zangief. So it's not true that you need to always go for some idea. One of the most important things I would say about playing against idiots is that things that are normally good just aren't that great because they have this different expectation of what the default in the game is. You have to act differently, and you have to be, if you're a grappler player, don't just go for grabs. That's it. So, I would say that it. The dumber your opponent is, the smarter you must play. I mean, kind of. It's smart in a certain way. It's smart in the sense that you design your gameplay to deal with idiots. Ed was totally right. That's what you have to do. You have to have a set of strategies and tactics and mix-ups that are good against people who don't know things or refuse to learn things. So a different set than you have against somebody who does learn and who does know. So, okay, I think that's going to be it for Level 3 Focus for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Time. But hope you enjoyed First Attack and Level 3 Focus tonight. I'll get the videos up on YouTube at youtube.com/UltraChenTV pretty soon.
Do you want to talk about the website again?
Yeah, that's right. If you're not watching on the website right now, please check it out. It's ultrachentv.com/live. That's where you can watch things. The website itself is ultrachentv.com. We also have ultrachen.tv. Somebody asked me about that, although it's not currently working. I have to figure out. Yeah, it's not redirecting right now. I've got to figure out what the deal is there. But we put blog posts up talking about things that we'd like to talk about. We put We have links to various fighting game websites and channels and streams on there as well. We're going to be updating it a lot more often, especially as we get people subscribing, as you can see down at the bottom on the Twitch pages. There are benefits for doing so, and part of those will show up on the blog. So please pay attention to that. But like I said, that's it for tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Later.